Well, is there anyone out there who isn't at least a little fed up with their partner these days? I mean, come on. We're stuck at home. We're spending more time than ever together. You can't even go out for a romantic dinner or a drink with a friend just to kvetch. Relationships are under strain. And yeah, I'd say the pandemic is largely to blame. We're feeling worn down, emotionally drained. But here's the thing, before you pull the plug on your relationship, he's got some tips. Danais is a mindset and relationship healing specialist, and he joins me now. Hello, Al.
Hello, Natasha. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing fairly well. Nice weather. It's not too cold outside in Winnipeg or Montreal, from what I can see.
Yeah, I will say the weather has been a blessing thus far in the pandemic, right? That's on our side, at least.
Yep.
As for the rest of it, I mean, good grief. I love my man. I have a great man. He is a trooper. He is an absolute sweetheart, and I still want to kill him, Al.
Yeah, that can happen, and that's normal. I mean, it doesn't mean the end of things. It's just part of the cycle.
So,
yeah.
Would you say that the situation that many people are finding themselves in, many couples are finding themselves in, is that the problems that already existed pre-COVID, pre-pandemic in relationships have just been highlighted, like it just added tension to it?
Yeah, so that's kind of what it is we're used to running maybe 2 kilometers a day, and now you have to run 10 or 20 every day. So your resilience and your resilience is down and your reserves are down. So it sometimes can create more issues in your relationship.
So, I mean, it makes me think of that, the saying about how you can't love someone else until you love yourself first, until you take care of yourself first. Would you say that's more true than ever, like during the pandemic?
I think it's something you have to explore, and you have to really make it your intent to do that, because otherwise you just get caught up in the moment, and those things can, those stressors can add up and just create a lot of havoc. So yeah, like the more you can kind of focus on yourself when you can. I know it's tough for some people, but the more you can do that, the better off you'll be in the longer run.
Can you maybe give us some self-care practices, things that we could do to help us quell our anxiety during these times?
Yeah, so I have one is basically things that will help ground you. So things that will help you let go of stress and create space, so that when you're working with someone else or talking with someone else and it's uncomfortable, that you might have a little bit more of a buffer, so you're not as drained at the end of the day. And it also helps if you have this self-care ritual. It can help improve your inner guidance and go, oh, this conversation is not going to work for me right now. So things you can do for that is you can journal, and journaling is very good because it involves all your senses, or most of your senses, and so as you write down stuff, maybe for some people it won't flow. Like for me, at first it did not flow too much, but after a few days it starts coming out. It's like the tap is open. Mm-hmm. So journaling is one thing you can do. You can go to nature and ground again. You can be with animals, read a book, take a bath. Just spend time with yourself. Spend time being and not doing for a few moments.
What I'm taking away from that, Al, is also in being with yourself, you're not being with your loved one.
Mostly, yeah, you're right.
Physically and emotionally, right? So you're physically separating yourself to give yourself the time and the space to do the journaling, to take that walk, right. And then like emotionally and mentally, you're also giving yourself that space. We're speaking with Danais, a mindset and relationship healing specialist. We're getting some tips basically on things to consider before you break up, before you pull the plug on your relationship. What would you say are the key things to consider before you pull the plug on a relationship that's not working for you right now?
Well, if there's abuse, that's something you gotta stop right away. So if you're talking physical abuse, there's no question about it. You have to do something about it. If you are talking emotional abuse, well, I guess it depends on how hard it is, because some people might not recognize it after a while. It might be normal. But a relationship where you're working on yourself, but you're not seeing the results because the other person, right, it takes two to tango, and the other person is always causing issues that are really causing you a lot of anxiety and stressing you out. After a while, you got to pull a plug because it'll drag you down and it'll make you sick. I'm speaking from experience there. I went through that.
You did, like it made you sick because you were so the pent up the stress of dealing with it all,
and the length of time.
Okay. So
it went for a long time. So then I figured out how to recover from that and how to, start helping other people with that.
Okay, that's what made you want to come into this, go into this field, Al?
Yeah, like I was in the field a little bit, and then I had my crisis, and that really, and then I had to dig in a lot deeper, right? So things we're talking about today are kind of the foundational things, the basic things that one does.
And so you learned a thing or two, and you want to then share that knowledge with us. That's great. I'm wondering, how can you tell the difference between being unhappy with your mate or being unhappy with yourself? Because I would imagine those things get blurred.
They are blurred, and they kind of, you're going to get into a lot of psychology here, but, everybody says, not everybody says, but they'll say, look at yourself first. So if you look at yourself, and look at the things that cause an emotional charge in you, and are they reasonable? So if someone, left the toilet seat up,
yeah,
right? How much is that going to help you for it to be on your mind all the time?
It's not.
And right, or if someone's going out all night and not calling you, well, that's different. Mm-hmm. You got to realize the differences in what's happening, what makes sense to have anxiety about or to feel sad about, and what is just a trigger that's there in you that automatically keeps, getting triggered when you see the situation.
Like an irritant is one thing, but then something that makes you seriously question your trust, that makes you, question whether or not that person is respecting you. I mean, those are two totally different things. Do you think you need to be, I'm thinking about how you need to sort of be looking back and looking forward at the same time, like dealing with unresolved issues from the past that may be resurfacing because of the stress of the pandemic. Would you turn to journaling again to try to deal with some of those things, Al?
Journaling is definitely one. You sit there and you look at the emotional charges, but and for example, I didn't realize this, but when I got married, it was either jealousy or mistrust. I'd be like, I'm curious about if she's talking to other people. I always had that feeling that I wanted to check, and I was like, that doesn't make sense. I mean, I just been with this person for a few months. I don't see, married, I was a couple of years by then, but I don't see the reason to want to do that. Like, that doesn't make sense. So then I kind of started going back in my psychology. Where did this start, and why did it start?
In reading and prepping for this interview, Al, one of the things that I found really interesting was the idea of looking back at what initially drew you to your partner. Is it healthy to look back on that in terms of taking stock of where you're at, and if you still love those things about that person, if that's still there?
So what initially drew me to my partner in a failed relationship? You're talking about my marriage?
No, I'm talking about anybody. Like, is it a good thing for you to think about that, to think about what initially drew you to your partner, and if that still exists? Is that a good key thing to look at in terms of determining if it's time to pull the plug?
Well, you're talking maybe chemistry, and there's chemistry, and then there's a long-term part of the relationship, and there's the chemistry and the lust phase. And is that lust phase, that wears out, but is the chemistry still there? Mm-hmm. That chemistry does something, like I've been with a person for 8 years now, and I still have that chemistry, and it's very strong. So when I go into a relationship, I look at, is the chemistry there? Because if it's not there, you're not going to be.
It's not going to last. And
it.
and when you look, you know what I'm liking about that mindset, Al, is the idea, like when the toilet seat is left up and it's bugging you, think about the chemistry, think about the things that drew you to that person in the first place, especially before pulling the plug over some of the more trivial things that the tension that's been ramping up lately. Hey, Al, thanks for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and have a great day, and thanks. Glad to be talking with Montreal today.
Thank you, Al. That's Al Danais, a mindset and relationship healing specialist.